let's do a bit of visualization in Unreal Engine, specifically architectural visualization. So I wanted to create these videos to summarize some of the most important, some key elements that you can keep in mind when you are creating some renders and sequences for architectural visualization. And going to include some tips and tricks and what to do with some troubleshooting that we can encounter sometimes in Unreal Engine. Now, the first part is going to be, and actually I'm going to do something really quick that is called VSync editor, that maybe you can see it in the recording. Escape here, that my screen is tearing, and that is the sync or the frame rate between my screen and the editor. So I'm going to do VSync editor 1, and now that's going to activate the VSync. Cool. That's something that can help anyone trying to do a recording from Unreal Engine in the screen. You can always launch the games directly in here, record your screen, and create some visuals, quick visuals with that method. So that might help you with that issue. Cool. The first thing that I'm going to do is going to be the video sequencer. And by default, since Unreal Engine 5.1, I think, or 5.2, maybe even earlier, the Unreal Engine uses the movie render queue to render things, and it all connects as well with some sequences. So let's begin from scratch, and let's do a cinematic level sequence. And actually, let's do UE5 sequences. Cool. I'm actually going to create a new folder. Let's call it sequences. Let's move that one here. Sequence. Let's do sequences test. Excellent. Now I can open that one and we get the sequencer. You might change the position. Normally I think it opens here at the bottom. It might open in a different window for you. You can then anchor it if you want to. I like having it at the bottom. And that's how you control most of the functions that you are going to use for a sequence, for an animation, or for the movement of the camera settings and different things like that. Right, let's create a camera. Actually, let's move this outliner back. Excellent. Layers can go there. Right, outliner. Let's do, this is not the best file when it comes to the outliner. Always try to organize everything in folders, clear structure, and things that are clear to use. I like having a camera folder. I think I'm pressing G to bring the icons. Let's use this camera. Then you can grab from the outliner, move it to the sequencer, and you can click. Let's just click G again so we can hide all of those icons. And you can click this camera icon in here to go in and out of the camera. So you can see in here it says pilot camera, camera actor 2, which is the one that I have in here. So if I click that one, you see that it's not highlighted anymore. Is now going to be the free movement. And if I click again, it's going to lock me back into the camera position. All right, now that I have this camera, I actually want to keep it a bit back. So let's do a dolly shot that moves from the couch into the kitchen. So I'm going to position the camera around here. And the first step is going to be to lock the position. So if I move the camera and I go back to that 0, it's going to lock back into the right position. So it's good to keyframe those as often as possible. Now let's start changing some camera settings. If you click this actor, the camera actor 2, or any element that you have in this list, is going to take you to the details settings for that object, in this case the camera. Now let's do a few things, and this is particularly important for architectural visualization, that moving the camera in too many directions, it can distort the geometry, and we don't want to distort walls or different objects, especially like if I look up too sharply, everything starts to go in that perspective. A lot of settings to adjust, to keep in mind, but the first one that I would do is to change the rotation to the red and green 0 and 0, which you can also find in here in the transform. All the settings that you have in here, you can change it and activate in here, or most of them, and you can keyframe those movements. So the roll and pitch of the camera, which is red and green, are better to keep it in 0. So now that I click that, if I move it, is keyframe to that 0. And I like to do the same for 90 for the position of the shot. And it was actually minus 90. Again, to keep it in the right angles, so I can start playing with the camera position, the camera settings, to create the shot that I want. So this is just to position the camera in a way that is clean for the shot, and it's a starting point, and you can always go back and adjust it depending on what you want to achieve. Right, something to keep in mind: if you change a setting on the details panel on the right side, it's not going to be automatically keyframe. So you can see in here yaw, which is the blue, says 89, and in here it says 90. So as soon as I move, you see that it goes back to that keyframe value. So what I'm going to do is press 90, again minus 90, and I'm going to keyframe the transform. So if you click this one at the top, it's going to apply to all the settings below. If you do it for each one of these individually, it's going to do only a keyframe for each one of those settings. And then if you change the setting in here, it's going to do it automatically, and it's going to keep the keyframe in there. So two different places that you can change the settings, different ways that you can adjust things. And that takes me to another little detail that you can see now in the details panel. That is the icon to the right side of all the settings, or most of the settings, actually for a few of the settings. And that little icon means that you can take that value, that property, into the keyframes. So let's go now. Another one that I like using, or that I change quite immediately, is things like field of view and different parameters. And I just realized the camera that I have here is the default camera, which doesn't have as many properties. The recommended one is the Cine Camera Actor. I'm gonna create, just by going into this little lines settings, create camera here, and I'm gonna create Cinema Camera Actor. I'm gonna name it something that I understand. With that camera actor created, let's move back into the folder, camera folder. Now let's replace this one. So I'm gonna select that one. Two things, you can click and press delete. I'm gonna do the same for this one. And let's move living to kitchen camera in here. Now you're gonna see I have a few different settings, which is good. Let's check the properties of rotation, the same, since I created it in the same spot. So that's good. Now there's a few settings that I like to change. First one, film back. There's multiple properties. The ones that we might be more used to is the DSLR. So I recommend to change to that. And then the lens setting is going to be the next one that I normally start adjusting. So 30mm is one that I like using, especially for interior shots, because it keeps the distortion of the perspective to a minimum degree, I would say. so everything feels a bit more straight and organized. Cool. Now something that happens, as you can see, because now I changed the lens, is gonna have a different angle, a different depth. So in this case, it's simply that I'm getting close to the TV, and that's why I got behind it. Something that you can do is now inside the camera settings, you can type clip and use custom near clipping plane. So if I move back and I get behind that wall, I can start moving this one up, and what it's going to do is going to clip any geometry that is in front of me to different levels. Actually, let's just keep going so you can see what I mean. So if I keep going, you can see how it starts to disappear and just clip through. So it's simple value of 50 is good. Let's reset all of the settings. So let's make this one 0, this one -90, and I'll use keyframe that transform, so it stays in there. Now, this is just a starting point. Again, it depends on what you want to achieve with your shots, so you need to plan carefully, create a composition of what you want to show, what is the main subject that you want to capture, and what is important for the dynamic that you want to create with the sequences if you're doing a sequence video. Cool. In this case, I just want to move forward and get to the kitchen. Now, something else that you might notice is that now there's some depth of field and some different focus points, different focus point in here. So that's another setting that we can adjust for focus setting. I'm gonna click that, and now I can select what I want to focus on. Something to keep in mind is if you use a clipping plane, it might focus to whatever it is that is getting cut by that clipping plane. In this case, the wall, which is really in front of us. If you click the back focus plane, you can move this forward, and you're gonna see a purple plane that is the focus distance and the focus point. So I'm gonna leave it in there. I like keeping it in good numbers, and you can also keyframe that value so you can change the focal length, focus distance if you want to. And you have multiple settings in here. You can do different aperture values, and that's going to help you control how much blur, how much depth of field you're going to have. So I'm going to deselect that one, and if I do something, you can keep an eye on the background and increase that value. The depth of field starts to get deeper. So smaller values, it's going to be a shallow depth of field, and it also depends on the different focal length that you have in here. So play with those settings, see what works better for you. In this case, as a quick example, I'm going to keep it in that position. Actually, let's do sharper image so it doesn't blur the background too much. And in this case, I'm not going to change the different values of the camera, so I'm going to keep it only the transform position in here. And now to get the movement of the camera, I'm going to move it forward in the sequence. And I just realized something that you might have different. By default, Unreal Engine has the numbers as keyframes, but you can change it into seconds if you want to, just to show the time in a different way. I prefer the seconds. Now I can see how long the shots are going to take, or the sequence are going to take, and then I can decide how long it's going to be by clicking this gear play icon. And right now it's going to go from 0 to 5. Let's do it to 10. And I would say for architectural visualizations, as we do typically, 10 would be a good number, or a maximum number that I would use for sequences. It's better to get multiple shots that are short and that they take the time to showcase the architecture, the different pieces, and then have multiple shots and that show the dynamic of what you want to create. All right, now that I have that, let's do from 0 to 10, and I'm going to type here 10. You can still see how many frames are in there. But yeah, this one controls what the position is. So I'm going to go to 10. I'm going to move the camera, just moving forward, and then keyframe. And that's all you need to do. Now, something else that I would recommend you to do, you can click the keyframes to get back to them, so you can change the properties. And now, something that I would recommend you to do is, instead of moving the camera to create those frames, what I would suggest you, I'm going to go back before I create that keyframe. Let's go back to 10. And now what I would suggest you to do is to change the settings, or change the position through these location parameters, so it's a bit more precise. In this case, you can see one controls horizontal movement, the other one back and forth, and the final one is the height. So I'm going to do 100. Let's do 240, 230. Okay, let's go back to 60. And now, one other tip that is good to have active is that you can overlay different grids that help you compose the shots. But to get those, you need to click in perspective and change to cinematic viewport. That's going to give you also some extra icons to activate and manipulate the view. You also get some of those here at the bottom. But now you get an extra layout option that lets you overlay a few different properties that we see in cameras. So just middle points and grid. Rule of thirds is are good to have. By default, it's going to take you out of the camera. You only have to click back to the camera, make sure that you are inside that. And now is going to have all of the properties. I can see that keyframe, that overlay, and I can control a bit more the position of what I want to do. So let's try and keep it in between the two lamps, and that's going to be -50. Let's do 260, I think. Let's do 270. I like that position. And 100. Actually, let's have it in the middle of that back splash. 210. 115, like that. And again, always go back to keyframe, because if you move it, you're going to lose that keyframe position. Excellent. Oh, and it actually did it. So let's make sure, actually, I just realized I probably, yep, I created the keyframe just slightly after the 0 position. So I have to, can select all of those, delete. Let's move this one back to 0. Excellent. Now all my properties are correct. And now I'm going to move to 10. And let's move forward. And again, I'm going to use the slider option in location. Let's get to that point. That's going to be 4, but I can use keyframe, and now all the properties are keyframe in there. Cool, and I can press space, and you can see what you get. Now, a few more things that I recommend you to do is change the frames per second to 24, and click this curve option. Click the transform settings, and let's press Ctrl A to select all and make it all linear interpolation. That's something that you might not realize, but it really changes the perception of the shots that you create. Is that if you have the curved or automatic or cubic interpolation, the movement of the camera starts to slow, speeds up, slows down to end, which is not quite natural and it feels odd for this type of shots that we create. So if you again select all of those and we change it to linear interpolation, now everything is going to have the same speed, the same rhythm. So center spacebar to play, and we can see what the shot is. Excellent. Now you can add multiple things and multiple actors, meshes, and lights into this sequencer to also keyframe different properties. So try and drag and drop in a few of those properties and you can decide what to do. You might not have all the properties, but remember you can go back into the details panel. Once you click, and you can see here, if I click the camera, I get the camera settings. If I click the light, I get the light settings, and you get all of the options that you can keyframe directly in here. So if you want to change the intensity, so it's maybe 0 at the beginning, and at the end you want to activate the lights, you can make it so it is 0 and starts to increase slowly. You can do the same with the directional light, and now we can start creating a day to night shot where the lights activate, and all with those keyframes. So play with those options. Excellent. Now the final step, I'm going to delete this one. For now, I'm just going to have the camera. Save. Always good to save the files. And the next step is to render. So let's click this icon. That's going to give you the movie render queue. By default, it's going to activate or give you that sequence that you are working on once you click in there. And we can jump into some settings to change for video, or a few recommendations I have for you. And the first one is by default you might have some settings that you can check in this presets option. Do you normally get the still draft and still ultra if you go to show engine content and show plugin content? That's going to give you those two. And those are quite good to get some renders of high quality. So give it a try, see how it looks. But those settings don't use the path tracer, which is gonna be quite good if you have glass. And you can see, just changing here, you have the preview mode from lit to path tracing. And you see how, especially reflection in glass, it's going to be a lot more precise because it's going to calculate bounces of light a lot more precisely. So let's do some settings for that path tracer. And actually, I should also mention, if you don't have the path tracer, you need to go to the project settings, go down to rendering, and make sure that you have ray tracing active, support hardware ray tracing, and path tracing active. With those, you should get that path tracing. Path tracing is only available for those graphics card with ray tracing capability or hardware ray tracing capability. So RTX graphics card, most of them, actually, if it says RTX, it means that it has the option, so you should be able to activate it. That's going to give you this option. Excellent. All right, but we need to activate the path tracing in the rendering settings, and I'm going to give you a few basic options. So let's just delete all of this, so we start from scratch. Excellent. Let's do anti-aliasing. I'm gonna recommend you to do games override, high resolution, EXR, and finally path tracer. Now, important ones is the anti-aliasing. These two are going to control the best way to put it is the noisiness of an image when you do path tracing. So it's going to smooth and clean all of the pixels in the image, or calculate more pixels in the image. It can be a bit complicated, confusing to understand each one of these. So I would recommend you to try and find path tracing options. It's not only something for Unreal Engine, it's just anything that goes with path tracing uses this type of settings. But just to keep it simple and short, if you want a high quality path tracing setting, 16 by 16 seems to be a good balance between how long it's going to take and the quality that you get. And also something that I like doing is changing this to 8 and 16. There's some settings that give me good results. Now, anti-aliasing, you can leave this by default. I didn't mention it. Once you activate this sample count options, you need to override anti-aliasing and click none. And we can go now to output. I'm gonna do the 3840 4K. I'm gonna save this setting in my desktop. And this is an interesting one to keep in mind. If you want to do one image or still image render, remember to activate this custom playback range. So this is the amount of frames that you're going to render. And in this case, because we're doing a sequence, it's better to deactivate, so it renders all of the frames in this sequence, those 10 seconds or 240 frames that we have. Now we are ready to render, and click accept. Something else to mention actually is that you have some path tracing settings that the camera is going to affect. It's also in the camera path tracing. These are the same that you can find in the post-process volume, so I recommend to use. An interesting settings to keep in mind is the denoiser. And when you use the path tracer, you're going to see noise in the image, and that's why the anti-aliasing becomes important. And the more value you have in the anti-aliasing, is going to smooth out things quite nicely. But if you keep it in low values, then using the denoiser, it becomes really useful. So this is a trade-off. The denoiser in Unreal Engine can be quite aggressive. So sometimes if you want really good quality, really good details, it's better to remove the denoiser, increase the values in the anti-aliasing that we did in the render queue in here. And that's going to give you better results, but it's better to test what you want. At the beginning, especially when you're testing, it's going to be better to just keep denoiser active. And once you know what render sequence you want to do, you can go to the maximum of the settings. Cool. Once you have that, you can click render local. And I created already sequence, so we save some time. And the EXR format that we selected is a format that lets you capture more color details. So it's recommended to use it, especially for sequences or videos. And by default, you can open it up in Photoshop. Now, once you do all of these sequences, multiple options that you can do. After Effects and DaVinci Resolve are the ones that are the most used, and it's simply clicking import and you'll get the option to import the sequence. Because I'm more familiar with DaVinci Resolve, I'm going to show it in this. but it's pretty much the same in After Effects, and you can also search and find import EXR sequences in After Effects. Excellent. Actually, let's open up the one that you already have, which is to DaVinci. Excellent. Now, the way that I do it is import, remembering to click sequence, and then I search for the folder. So I should have desktop, and I didn't click the right one. It is, that's not the right one. Where is my desktop? Here, OneDrive, desktop, and here is my folder. And immediately, if we bring the folder back, you can see that it immediately makes it into a sequence from the images. So nothing else that you need to do. Here, activating that sequence option. The same is going to be when you import in After Effects. You right click in the media space and import. It's going to try to recognize the sequence. Excellent. Now I'm going to bring it into the timeline, and you have that sequence that you can play back and forth. So let's just play. Oop. So we jump here with the recording. Let's see. There you go. And that is the process that you need to do. And actually, let's just try it really quickly. I think I have After Effects. Yes. Let's try to bring the sequence in After Effects. All right, let's create a new project. And now let's import. And let's import multiple files, I think it is. Yep. And let's go to my desktop here. And you have here the option Open EXR Sequence. So just make sure that you click the first frame of the 00 frame. And then click Import. Oh, I think I should have selected all of the frames. Yep. And click Import. Excellent. Done. Let's see which one is the correct one. There you go. And now you get the same sequence in EXR. You can see in here, this is the original values. The colors, I changed the colors a little bit in here. But that's the next step, the color grading process of creating a sequence. So hopefully this helps you to get started with your sequences. Just keep in mind to always keep it short, always to control the sequence and the camera position, the movement as much as possible. For architectural visualization, we are focusing in the architecture, the space, the qualities of the materials, and the different aspects of how you would move through the architecture. So try to make it in a slow pace. Try to take the time to showcase the multiple elements in the shots. Keep in mind always to compose the shots no matter what you do. Think on what is the subject of the shot. What do you want to focus on? How much depth of field you need in the shot to really convey the message and the story that you want to create. So keep all of this in mind and start creating those sequences. And until next time, bye.